Welcome to today's Explainer. We spend a lot of time talking about the broad landscape of financial crime prevention, but today we're demystifying one of the absolute most critical, yet, honestly, frequently misunderstood roles in the whole system. If you've ever found yourself wondering how financial institutions actually hold the line against illicit finance behind closed doors, well, you're exactly in the right place. We're going to look way past the usual corporate jargon to see how anti-money laundering frameworks actually function from the very top down.
So think about this for a second. When you picture who truly guards the gates against financial crime in a massive firm, what actually comes to mind? Maybe a giant compliance department, an army of analysts crunching numbers, or maybe some hyper-advanced AI system? Well, while all of those things are definitely crucial, the ultimate responsibility, the true focal point of all those defenses, actually rests on the shoulders of a single pivotal senior role.
And that role, of course, is the Money Laundering Reporting Officer, or the MLRO. Now, looking at the Financial Conduct Authority's baseline definition, it becomes crystal clear that this is not just some administrative title. No way. The MLRO is a heavyweight, FCA-approved senior management position. They are the individual ultimately responsible for overseeing the entire anti-money laundering framework. Think of them like the conductor of a very complex orchestra, making absolutely sure illicit funds do not enter the system.
Okay, let's dive into this. To really dissect the anatomy of this guardian role layer by layer, we've got a quick roadmap. First, we'll formally meet the MLRO. Second, strategy and operations. Third, the legal gateway. Fourth, the maturity mandate. And finally, number 5, guardianship and governance.
Jumping right into Section 1. Meet the MLRO, the anchor of AML.
Right off the bat, we have to understand that the MLRO's core identity sits at a highly pressurized intersection. We're talking governance, escalation, regulatory accountability, and suspicious activity handling. They aren't just some passive report recipient sitting in a back office somewhere or a basic policy owner who updates a manual once a year. No, they are the living, breathing central nervous system for identifying money laundering risk. They actively challenge the business, and honestly, they're occasionally the ultimate deal breaker for an overly eager sales team.
In fact, a phrase you'll hear constantly from regulators, like right here in the FCA handbook, is that the job of the MLRO is to act as the focal point for all AML-related activity within the firm. The FCA repeats that term focal point for a very good reason. Every risk, every red flag, every major policy shift, it all converges right at their desk. It's the central motif of everything they do.
Which brings us to Section 2, strategy and operations, the dual dimension. This is fascinating because the MLRO actually operates on two entirely different planes at the exact same time. On the strategic dimension, they're taking that 30,000-foot view. They're overseeing the design of the entire AML framework, the policies, the monitoring, and the risk assessments. But then, on the operational dimension, down in the trenches, they are the exact person receiving internal disclosures and deciding in real time whether to report activity to law enforcement. So they have to simultaneously design the grand strategy while flawlessly executing these high-stakes, daily operational decisions. It's quite the balancing act.
Moving on to Section 3, the legal gateway, disclosures and offenses.
Okay, this is where things get incredibly serious. Under the UK's Proceeds of Crime Act, 2002, a nominated officer can literally commit a criminal offense for failure to disclose where statutory conditions are met. We are talking about massive personal liabilities here. If an MLRO misses a critical red flag, they aren't just risking a corporate slap on the wrist or a fine for the bank. They are risking personal jail time. The law explicitly holds them personally accountable.
Now let's quickly disentangle some terminology here. In the industry, you'll hear MLRO, and you'll also hear nominated officer. While the Money Laundering Regulations 2017 explicitly require a nominated officer to handle disclosures, in almost all major firms, the MLRO and the nominated officer are the exact same person. They wear two incredibly heavy hats. They carry the broad oversight duties of the MLRO alongside the strict, legally perilous disclosure gateway role of the nominated officer.
And this brilliantly illustrates how that complex legal obligation actually plays out in practice. It's a 3-step flow. Step 1. An internal staff member spots something weird and makes a disclosure under POCA. Step 2. The MLRO steps in to assess the concern and rigorously documents their rationale. And finally, Step 3, the MLRO makes the ultimate call on whether an external suspicious activity report, or SAR, needs to be filed with law enforcement. It sounds super methodical, right? But in reality, making that call is incredibly complex. Because ultimately, the buck stops entirely with the MLRO's assessment. The quality of their personal judgment directly dictates whether real suspicious activity is escalated properly to authorities or if it just slips entirely through the cracks. There is no algorithm, no software out there that can completely replace the nuanced, experienced judgment of a human MLRO sitting in that chair, making that final, high-stakes call.
Let's look at what it actually takes to sit in that chair in Section 4, the Maturity Mandate, Authority and Access. To successfully design risk-based controls, an MLRO needs massive, sweeping scope. They absolutely must have visibility over business-wide financial crime risk, individual customer risk, transaction monitoring outcomes, sanctions-adjacent issues, training effectiveness, and remediation priorities. That is a huge list. You simply cannot entrust this level of access to a junior employee. An MLRO has to be a professionally mature leader with supreme authority across the entire business, not just some technical specialist hidden away in a compliance silo. They need to see the whole board.
The Joint Money Laundering Steering Group guidance makes this crystal clear. If an MLRO is too junior, if they're operationally isolated, or if they lack direct access to senior management, the firm effectively only has a paper AML framework. Sure, it might look great in a binder sitting on a shelf, but it lacks any real control or escalation in reality. Without that seniority, the entire defensive system fundamentally shatters the moment it's actually tested.
Finally, we arrive at Section 5, Guardianship and Governance, the ultimate impact.
When you put it all together, the MLRO is an undeniable barometer for a firm's foundational integrity. A strong MLRO materially improves the coherence and credibility of a firm's entire AML framework. They challenge the business and ensure controls actually work. Conversely, a weak or unsupported MLRO doesn't just mean bad compliance, it signals a much deeper governance weakness in the way the firm manages money laundering risk as a whole. It's a fundamental flaw.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a rather provocative question. Take a hard look at your own organization or the financial institutions you interact with. Does the firm's MLRO act as a true guardian, a mature focal point with the authority to genuinely challenge the business? Or are they just a regulatory checkbox, isolated and unsupported? Because that answer will tell you almost everything you need to know about how seriously that organization takes its role in the global fight against financial crime. Thanks so much for joining me to unpack this critical role today, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.